Okay, I think let's start. Anybody else comes, that's great, and we can start from there. Okay, so what I wanted to look at is kind of like we've caught up the aliyahs. So every day, obviously there's 7 aliyahs, so every day is kind of like an accompanying aliyah. So if that's the case, what I wanted to do is just to look at to try and keep up with the aliyahs of the day. So today we'll do Revi'i, which I should have known that today was Wednesday because I prepared Revi'i. But okay, so if we look at Revi'i is the story of everything's now, the flood is over. Everything is now, God has to get back to normal. And I wanted to reflect on what the Torah says, and how and perhaps some lessons that we can get out of it. So the Torah says, Elohim el Noach lemor, that Hashem spoke to Noach, and he said to Noach very simply, say mina Teivah, go out of the Teivah, ata v'ishtecha, you and your wife, v'anecha v'neshev v'anecha itach, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. So the first thing that's important to point out is that all the way through the story, there have been different ways in which to understand the way Hashem is operating, because the way we understand the way Hashem operates is through the name that He uses in His operation. So in this case here, we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when He speaks to Noach, He uses the name Elohim. Now Rashi tells us that, sorry, not Rashi, the Netziv says, he says that we've already explained that when it says Elokim, the word Elokim, Shehu HaBoireh HaTeva, we're talking about the one who created the world, V'hu Yitbarach HaMakayma, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that keeps it going. So therefore, according to what the Netziv is going to say now, is that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu now approaches Noach to move out of the Teivah, he approaches him from the position of being the creator of the world. But it's not only the creator of the world. Remember, the creator of the world is the creator of structure, of, to use a word that we use today, protocol, rules. That's what the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing. So now he says to Noach, go out, you and your wife and your sons and their wives with you. Rashi points out that from here we see that they are now they're given permission to go and multiply and be together and to recreate the world and to populate the world. So it's clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's position that he's holding at this point in time, through the Shem Elohim, the name that implies Hashem as this creator of the world, really what he wants them to do is he wants them to go out and create. He wants them to go out and populate the world, to fill the world, to restart this world that he had created with specific reasons and what have you. So what happens? The Torah says, and then Hashem says, and also not only you, but all the animals, all the animals with you. And the Torah says, listen carefully to the words. Hashem had said, you go out with your wife, and your sons wives go out. And the Torah describes what Noach did, and it says, Vayetze Noach went out, uvanav, and his sons, ve'ishto, and his wife, u'neshev vanavito, and his sons' wives with him. So you can see that the order in which they exited the Teivah is not the order that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them to leave. So immediately, it just struck me to see that here is Noach going out into a world that has just been destroyed because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has brought this incredible judgment on him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, we're going to recreate the world. You are the prime recreator, so to speak. And what does Noach do? He doesn't listen. It's mind-boggling. He doesn't listen. He goes out of the ark in a different order from the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to do. So you'll say, well, the reason why I told him the first one is that he just to emphasize that he must be with his wife. But I think it's much bigger than that. I think it's clearly an indication that Noach's mindset is that he's not yet ready to be with his wife, for his sons and his daughters to start recreating the world. Not at all. Rather, he's terrified. And what happens? What did Hashem tell him? Clearly, the first thing to do is to be together with. What does Noach do? Vayiven Noach mizbeach, and Noach builds a mizbeach laHashem. Who spoke to him earlier was the Shem Elokim. Noach, in coming out of the Teivah, firstly, he comes out the wrong way. And secondly, the first thing he does is that he builds a mizbeach laHashem. He builds this mizbeach, this altar, and it's incredibly noble that he's doing that, a mizbeach to Hashem, not to Elokim, not to the creator of the world, but to Hashem. And he takes all the animals, the kosher animals and all the kosher birds from them, and he brings olot b'mizbeach, and he brings these burnt up offerings onto the mizbeach. So what's really happening here? Why does he do that? Why does Noach deviate from what it seems to be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to do? So the Netziv says, why is it that Noach built a mizbeach? Vayiven Noach mizbeach laHashem. Now we understand, well, we can understand that Noach needs connection. We can understand that Noach needs to know that he's that it's going to be okay. But when do you build a mizbeach? We know that the first time the mizbeach was built, that we go back into Bereshit, the first time we find an offering of any sort, of some sort, is coming from who? From Cain and Hevel. And in coming from Cain and Hevel, it's not a mizbeach that is built in gratitude to Hashem because nothing. Rather, it's built in gratitude to Hashem because they've been through a process. They have flocks, they have crops, and now they bring it in gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now comes along Noach and he builds a mizbeach. Why does he build a mizbeach? Says the Netziv, Mishum Sha'anidrash Librocha. He knew, Noach felt that he needed a brocha. And because he needed a brocha, what you do, you bring a brocha. He says, Al Kain, he kriv korban, shemuchsha la brocha keyadua. Says, so what did he do? He brought a korban, he brought an oila. He doesn't bring a mincha. Mincha is a voluntary offering, but he brings this offering in total praise for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to receive the brocha. But what he didn't realize is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to say, Mina Teivah, that is the brocha in and of itself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to him, go out, I'm with you, I need you to populate the world. So what does he do? He brings from all the different animals, and he brings this korban to Hashem, not to Elokim, not to the creator of the world, but rather to Hashem, the Shem Hashem Yudkei Vavkei, which is a name which implies Rachamim, a name which implies mercy. Why is that so important? Because in order to get the brocha, he thinks that what he needs is the Rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know that again throws us back to Bereshit, the creation of man, where initially the world is created b'Shem Elokim until man comes along, and then it's Hashem Elokim. We need Hashem to add on because we need the Rachamim. Noach is very aware of that, and he believes that he needs that. And the Torah then says the most interesting thing: Vayarach Adonai et reach hanichoach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu smells this nice, beautiful smell in the Shem Hashem. He smells it as part of the Hashem of Rachamim. Vayomer Adonai el libo, and Hashem says el libo, to his heart, which you're trying to understand what that means. Lo osif lekalel od et ha'adama ba'avur Adam. You know what? I'm not going to curse the ground because of Adam any longer, which we know really again is a throwback to the to Bereshit. Adam Harishon does what he does together with Chava, and because of that, the land is cursed. Is that he's got to at bezat hapecha toch halechem. It's not only a curse on Adam, that Adam has to work hard in order to get with the sweat of his brow, he'll eat the bread. It's not only a curse on Adam, it's also a curse on the ground, because the ground is not able to give forth in the way that it wants to give forth in accordance with its creation. Why is it that Hashem is no longer going to curse the ground because of Adam? Because you know why? The yetzer, the inclination of a person, is rami nu'rav, is bad, is negative, is anti the tov. Remember, ra is the opposite of tov. It's anti the tov of the creation of the world. And he says, I'm not going to ever do what I did before with the mabul. Comes along the Netziv and he says the following. He says, what does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to his heart? So he says, the Netziv says, Elibo kinui la mazalot shel habruim, shemahem totzaot chayei habruim. He says what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really talking to is he's speaking to the muzzles, the different spiritual forces that control the world at his behest, obviously of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's behest. And he's saying to them, and he's speaking to them, and he's saying, you know what? I'm not going to allow you ever to go to such an extreme space that I allowed the water to destroy the world in the way that it did. Why? Because why did I do that? Why would I punish man in a way in order to put him back on the straight path? He said, but you can see Noach comes out of the Teivah. He's told by Elokim to go and to be with his wife and to start procreating the world, to procreate and recreate and filling the world, right? And what does he do? He builds a mizbeach. He feels he needs bracha. So it's absolutely clear that the human being is not that able to constantly fit within the protocols, to fit within the discipline, to fit within the rules of the world. And if that's the case, then what's the point of punishing him in such an extreme manner? And then Tzir says, such a powerful idea. He said that how did this whole thing work? And he says, funny. He says, well, you know what happened is it started off with the destruction of the world. Started off. We go back at the end of Bereshit, that where Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, where the Torah says that there were these things called the Nephilim. The Nephilim were these, and it's not clear what it is, the angels, some spiritual forces, giants, that they came down and they saw all these beautiful women. And because they saw the beautiful women, everything started going wonky. That was we call znut. Once that had happened, because of the znut, according to the to Chazal, any type of sexual impropriety or sexual depravity, that creates famine, that creates hunger. And because it created hunger, therefore you had people who were stealing from one another because they didn't have their own. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I can't do that anymore. He says that the whole point of what I was trying to do is trying to get people on the right path, that they would involve themselves in a sexually depraved manner. So I wanted to get them right, so I punished them in a certain way. But their punishment didn't work because all they did is they went another way. The person as people, unless they have very clear morals, ethics, and values, people are going to deviate off the path. And so therefore, he says that I'm no longer going to be sending such extreme measures of punishment to the whole world because they just do not work. What I am going to do is I'm going to do something that's going to make sure, to try and ensure that people do not do Averas. Why? When do people do Averas? Says the Netziv, when people do Averas, it's very simple. People do Averas when they have too much idle time, too much money, too much excess. All of those things allow people to do Averas. So what am I going to do, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the pasuk, the last pasuk we're going to look at, of pasuk Chaf Bet of pasuk 22 of chapter 8. Od kol yemei haaretz zera v'katzir v'kor v'chom v'kait v'chorech v'yom v'layla lo yishbotu. He says, I'm never going to ever change the seasonal operation of the world. There's going to be light, there's going to be dark, there's going to be hot, there's going to be cold. Why? Because in each of those seasons demand a certain approach from the human being to make sure that they have what they need, that they're warm, that they're not too hot, that they have fire when they need light. All the different things demand a lot of work, and because it demands a lot of work, the human being will be so busy he won't be able to sin. And the reason why I thought that was so interesting is that we are so obsessed with finding things that make our lives easier, give us more time. And the question is, what are we doing with that time? Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us that time and gave us the challenges in the world in order to keep us on the, so to speak, the straight and narrow. And on this week here we see that Kodesh Baruch Hu sends, Noach out of the Teivah. In sending him out of the Teivah to recreate the world, Noach doesn't really listen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves the fact that Noach wants to connect, but he's connecting with Shem Hashem, with the Shem of Rachamim. He's not connecting with the name of the protocols, of the disciplines, of all of those things, because that is not human beings. Human beings need to be able to feed off the Rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and part of the Rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the cycle of of the seasons, it's the cycle of day and night. Those are the things that give us structure to ensure that we are able to do specific things, or we need to do specific things to keep us from just having idle time. So please God, we should always be busy, and in the merit of that busyness, we should achieve great things, personal growth, and fulfill our potential. Have a beautiful morning, everyone.